"You're not my true dad," she screamed. As two armies clashed over her fate, the city of Dravemere burned in the cold light of its twin suns. Smoke curled into the pale orange sky, and the distant sound of cannon fire shook the ground like an angry god. Streets once alive with vendors and children now lay empty, scattered with debris, overturned vehicles, and the broken bodies of those caught in the first wave of the Aurelian assault. The human defenders, outnumbered and outgunned, had dug in behind whatever cover they could find, knowing full well that the alien army standing across the city believed in no mercy. Lyra ran through a narrow alley, her breath quick and ragged. Dust choked her throat and clung to her hair. Her heart pounded not just because of the fear around her, but because of the chaos in her own life. Behind her, explosions shook the buildings, sending shards of glass raining down like deadly glitter. She could hear the mechanical stomping of the Aurelians as they advanced, their armor clicking and whirring in perfect unison. They were not human, and they were relentless. But even as terror filled her, a stubborn part of her refused to surrender. "Lyra," a voice called from behind her, rough and anxious. She turned just enough to see him, a man she had known as her father, rushing toward her. Commander Elias Grant's uniform was torn, his face smeared with soot, but his eyes burned with the same fire they always did. He had raised her as his own, taught her to run, to fight, to survive in a galaxy that often seemed bent on crushing humanity. She wanted to run to him, to find comfort in his presence, but the words that had been building in her chest for years refused to wait. "You're not my true dad?" she screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos like a laser. The words struck him harder than any enemy weapon could. He froze for a heartbeat, his own heart twisting, then quickly masked it with his usual steady calm. "I don't care about true or not," Elias said firmly, keeping his voice low so only she could hear. "I care about you being alive. That's all that matters right now." Lyra's lips trembled, but she didn't respond. She didn't know if she could. The accusation was not born out of anger alone. It carried years of confusion, fear, and the silent ache of a girl who had never known her true parents. Elias had never tried to hide it from her. He had told her the truth that she had not come from him by blood, that her origins were mysterious, and that she had been found as a child in an escape pod after a massacre no one wanted to explain. But hearing it screamed at the wrong moment, while their enemies advanced, felt like a betrayal. "We need to move," Elias said, grabbing her arm gently. He pulled her into the shadow of a crumbling wall as another volley of energy fire scorched the street ahead. "You don't have time for this now," Lyra wanted to argue, but the pounding of her heart reminded her that he was right. She allowed him to pull her along, the sharp sting of their separation from normalcy mixing with the rush of adrenaline. Around them, human soldiers fired from cover, shouting warnings and encouragement, trying to hold the advancing Aurelian soldiers at bay. The Aurelians themselves were terrifying. Their bodies were humanoid in shape, but their skin shimmered with a metallic sheen, reflecting the sun's light in jagged patterns. They moved with the precision of machines, coordinating attacks through unseen channels, and their weapons were unlike anything Lyra had seen on the human side. Pulsing energy rifles, shoulder-mounted disruptors, and floating drones filled the air with the hum of deadly intent. She had always been taught to respect the unknown, to be careful and patient. But even in her carefulness, nothing could have prepared her for this. They reached a narrow stairwell that led underground into what remained of the human colony's tunnels. The sound of boots on metal stairs echoed loudly in the enclosed space, and for a moment, the only thing Lyra could hear was her own labored breathing. Elias stayed close to her, scanning the stairwell for any signs of enemy ambush. "Why are they after me?" she whispered, barely able to hear herself over the din. Elias hesitated, then glanced at her with a mix of determination and sorrow. "Because you're special, Lyra. You've always been special. They don't see you as a person, they see you as a key. Something they want to use to control more than just this world." Lyra's mind spun. She had always felt different from the other children on the colony ship, but she never fully understood why. She had always looked a little off, a little strange, and some humans had stared or whispered, but she never thought it could mean this, being a living key to a galactic empire. "They want to use me?" she asked, her voice shaking. Like a tool," Elias nodded, his jaw tight. "Exactly, and I will never let them, not while I'm breathing." As they descended further into the tunnels, Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden explosion from above. Dust and debris rained down, and the sound of metal tearing filled the air. Human soldiers shouted, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear the terrifying alien chorus of the Aurelians celebrating their advance. Lyra stumbled and almost fell, but Elias caught her quickly, holding her close. "Focus on me. Keep moving," he said. His hands were strong but gentle, the kind of hands that had held her as a child when nightmares kept her awake at night. He had never been her father by blood, yet he had always been there, always protective. They reached a junction in the tunnels, where the human forces had set up a small command post. Soldiers were busy relaying messages and repairing damaged equipment, but every eye eventually turned toward Lyra. Whispers ran through the room, a mix of fear and awe. Even in hiding, she could feel the weight of being wanted by two armies. "Lyra," Elias said, kneeling so he was eye level with her. "Listen to me. You are not a prize. You are not property. You are not a weapon unless you choose to be. Do you understand?" She nodded, swallowing hard. The words offered some comfort, but the knot in her stomach remained. She had been running through life with pieces missing, her past, her true family, her identity. And now, in the middle of a war, she realized those pieces were not just missing, they were being fought over. The hum of the Aurelian energy rifles drew nearer. Lyra could hear the heavy footsteps above ground, feel the vibrations in the tunnel floor, and smell the acrid smoke seeping down the vents. The aliens were searching for her, and she understood in that moment how little control she actually had. "We have to get you out," Elias said. "There's a ship waiting. It's fast, and it can get us off-world before they realize what we're doing." Lyra's stomach twisted at the thought of leaving the only home she had ever known, even though it was now a battlefield. But she also knew she could not stay. She had no choice. The human soldiers formed a protective line around her and Elias as they moved through the tunnels, their weapons raised, ready to fight anyone who tried to stop them. As they approached the exit, the tunnels opened up to a ruined street. Sunlight stabbed through the smoke, illuminating the bodies and the shattered buildings. The human soldiers engaged the first wave of Aurelians, energy bolts flying and metal clanging as the two forces clashed. Lyra ducked behind a wall, trying not to breathe too loudly. Elias pulled her closer. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, gripping the hand he offered. Together they sprinted across the rubble, dodging fire and debris. For a moment, it felt impossible that they could make it. But humans had always survived the impossible, she realized. Somehow, against odds that should have been fatal, humans adapted. The ship was waiting at the edge of the city, partially hidden behind a collapsed tower. As they approached, Lyra could see the pilot waving frantically. The engines roared to life, and the vessel shook as if it knew it was about to carry them into freedom. Lyra turned back for a split second to look at the city, at the chaos, at the men and women risking their lives to cover their escape. She felt a flicker of something deep inside her, pride, fear, sorrow, all at once. She realized that leaving did not mean abandoning humanity. It meant surviving to fight another day, and maybe, just maybe, finding out what she truly was and what she could become. As they lifted off, the city below them became smaller, the smoke curling like ghostly fingers into the sky. Lyra sat back, exhausted but alive, and for the first time since the scream had left her lips, she looked at Elias, not as a father by blood, but as someone who had chosen her, defended her, and believed in her. The words she had shouted earlier still echoed in her mind. "You're not my true dad," she had said, and he had not flinched, had not tried to argue, he had only protected her. In that moment she realized something profound. Blood did not make a parent, choice did, courage did, love did. The twin sons of Dravemere cast long shadows across the scarred landscape as the human ship disappeared into the atmosphere. Lyra knew that this was only the beginning. The Aurelians would not give up so easily. Her past would continue to haunt her, and the galaxy had only begun to understand that humans were not to be underestimated. Elias reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "We're not safe yet, but we're together. That counts for something." Lyra nodded. And in the quiet hum of the ship's engines, she allowed herself to hope, to imagine, and to prepare. Because the war for her fate and the war to prove humanity's worth was only just beginning. Somewhere deep in the galaxy, two armies were already plotting their next move. But one thing was clear. The human spirit, even in one teenage girl, was unpredictable, unbreakable, and unwilling to bow to any empire, alien or otherwise. And that was exactly why she and all of humanity would survive. the ship tore through the upper atmosphere, leaving Dravemir's burning horizon behind. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hands clenched tightly on her knees. The hum of the engines beneath her felt like a heartbeat, constant and reassuring. But even as the city vanished into the distance, she could not escape the knowledge of what had happened, what she had said. Her scream, "You're not my true dad," echoed relentlessly in her mind. Elias Grant, sitting beside her, was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on the navigation panels. He did not respond to her words, and in his silence, Lyra found both comfort and frustration. He had never been her father by blood, and she had spent her entire life wondering where she truly came from. Now, as the Aurelians hunted her across the galaxy, the question of her origins became more urgent than ever. "You think I care if they're after me?" Elias finally said, breaking the silence. "I care that they can't take you, that's enough for me." His voice was firm but calm, a steady anchor in the storm of her thoughts. Lyra looked at him, unsure if she wanted comfort or truth. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why am I so important?" Elias sighed and leaned back. "Because you carry something the Aurelians need, something they cannot get from anyone else. You're unique, Lyra, more than human, more than what they expect." The words hit her harder than any blow. She had always felt different, always noticed that humans sometimes stared, sometimes whispered. She had never understood why. And now, in the quiet of a ship fleeing an alien army, she finally faced the truth. She was valuable not for herself, but for what others wanted to use her for. As the ship glided through space, the lights dimmed, revealing the small human crew that had joined them. Each person bore scars of battle, yet they carried themselves with pride and determination. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in courage and cunning. Lyra realized that even in her fear, she was surrounded by people who had chosen to fight, not flee, against an empire that had dominated the stars for centuries. Elias spoke again, his voice softer now. "Lyra, listen to me carefully. Whatever they say, whatever they promise, whatever they threaten, you are not a weapon unless you want to be. You decide who you are, that's something no one can take from you." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of her unknown past pressed down like a stone. She had no memory of her real parents, no clue about the life that had been taken from her. Every day with Elias had been a gift, but it had also been a reminder that she was an orphan, alone in ways that went deeper than blood. The ship's communication panel beeped suddenly, breaking her thoughts. Elias leaned forward, scanning the incoming signals. "Aurelian fleet," he muttered, frowning. "They've tracked us, they're not letting this go." Lyra's stomach dropped. The Aurelians did not negotiate, they did not give warnings. They pursued relentlessly, believing that bloodline gave them ownership over a life, and she was their prize. "They won't stop?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Elias said. "Not until they get what they want, but that doesn't mean we're defenseless. Humans always find a way." His words were confident, but Lyra noticed the tension in his jaw. Even the strongest humans could feel fear. Even the bravest soldiers carried doubts. The days that followed were a blur of movement and planning. The ship navigated through asteroid fields, skirting patrolled sectors and hiding from sensors that could detect them at light speed. Lyra spent the time learning about the Aurelians, the empire that sought her. She discovered that they ruled through genetic control, believing that only those with the right blood could command fleets, govern worlds, or hold power. Humans, according to their doctrine, were unpredictable, messy, and unworthy of influence. Lyra's bloodline, however, represented an anomaly. Somewhere deep in her DNA lay codes that could unlock systems designed to control Aurelian fleets across galaxies. They did not see her as a child. They saw her as a key, a weapon, one that could give them absolute power if they could bend her to their will. Elias caught her staring at the holographic projections one evening. "It's a lot to take in," he said gently. "I know, but you are still Lyra, you are still you. Don't let their rules define you." Lyra wanted to believe him, but the fear gnawed at her. She wondered if she could survive what was coming. Could she face the empire that had already killed countless worlds, an empire that believed in destiny as much as death? Her training with Elias, however, had not been wasted. Every day in the ship's simulator, every exercise, every lesson about strategy and human ingenuity became more valuable. Humans had a reputation for turning the impossible into possible, and Lyra realized she was learning what it truly meant to be one. Then came the ambush. It happened in the outer rim of a minor star system, a place humans rarely visited because of its harsh asteroid fields and unstable gravity wells. The ship had slowed to scan for resources when a fleet of Aurelian vessels dropped from hyperspace like shadows falling over the sun. Lyra felt the first real pang of fear since leaving Dravemere. The ships outnumbered them 10-1. Their sleek metallic bodies reflected starlight as they moved into position, weapons primed to obliterate anything in range. "Lyra," Elias said, voice tight, "we have to act fast, stick to the plan." Lyra nodded, heart pounding. The plan was desperate but simple. Use the asteroid field to their advantage, make the Aurelians believe they were cornered, then break through with speed and unpredictability. Humans always excelled when no one expected them to survive. The battle began with a thunderous roar. Energy blasts streaked across space, tearing apart asteroids and debris. The human ship twisted and turned with precision, dodging shots that would have obliterated larger vessels. Lyra found herself at the controls of the defense systems, using instincts she didn't know she possessed. Every decision was life or death, and every correct maneuver reminded her that she was not just a passive prize. She was a participant in her own survival. Elias monitored her, giving calm instructions, his faith in her abilities unwavering. "Good, Lyra, keep your focus. Don't let them predict you." Hours passed like minutes. The Aurelian fleet pressed harder, yet each move the humans made was unpredictable, forcing the aliens to adapt constantly. It was not technology alone that saved them. It was the stubborn, unyielding creativity of humans. Lyra realized with a rising pride that humanity was more than survival, it was defiance. Finally, the Aurelians were forced to retreat temporarily. The human ship sustained damage, but it was still operational. Lyra slumped in her seat, exhausted, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She had faced an entire fleet, and against all odds, humans had survived. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare moment of tenderness amid chaos. "You see," he said, "this is what I've always told you. Humans never give up, and neither do you." Lyra nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She had screamed at him, accused him, doubted him, but in that moment she understood something deeper. Blood did not determine her worth, nor did her unknown origins. Her choices, her courage, her refusal to bow, that was what defined her. But even in victory, a shadow loomed. The Aurelians were patient. They did not retreat forever. Somewhere in the vastness of space, they would be planning their next move. And Lyra knew that the next encounter would test not just her skills, but her very understanding of what it meant to be human. That night, as the stars streaked past the ship at faster-than-light speed, Lyra sat quietly, staring at the galaxy beyond the viewport. Elias prepared reports, the crew rested, and for a brief moment the hum of the engines was the only sound. She whispered to herself, almost afraid to speak it aloud, "I won't be their key. I'll choose my own path." In that promise lay the heart of humanity. Not the technology, not the numbers, not the strength alone, but the unyielding will to be free, to choose, and to survive. And the galaxy would soon learn that such a spirit was impossible to control. Elias glanced at her from the corner of his eye, seeing the determination burning in her face. He knew this was only the beginning. Lyra had survived the first attack, but the true test had not yet come. The Aurelians would return, stronger and smarter. And when they did, Lyra would have to decide whether to embrace her unknown heritage or fight entirely on her own terms. And she would. Because humans never followed the rules of others. Humans never surrendered. And humans always found a way. The stars outside the ship stretched into long, glowing lines as they entered hyperspace. Lyra leaned against the viewport, staring at the blur of light, and tried to calm her racing thoughts. The battle in the asteroid field had tested her in ways she never imagined. And for the first time, she truly understood what Elias meant when he said humans never gave up. But even as she reflected on their narrow victory, a new realization struck her. She could no longer run from her past. She could no longer hide behind the label of human orphan. The Aurelians would not stop, and soon she would have to face the truth about herself. Elias entered the cockpit, carrying 2 cups of hot nutrient fluid. He handed one to Lyra, and she accepted it with a small nod, her fingers brushing his. The contact was brief but grounding. She had shouted at him weeks ago, accused him of not being her real father, and yet he had stayed. He had defended her, taught her, and never treated her as property, despite the galaxy insisting she belonged to someone else. You're thinking too much, he said, settling into his own seat. It's hard, I know, but we need to focus on what's next. The Aurelians will regroup, and when they do, it won't be just a fleet. It will be a hunt. Lyra swallowed hard, her eyes still fixed on the shifting stars. I can't stop thinking about who I really am, she admitted. They keep calling me a key, but what if I really am? What if they're right? Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we use it on our terms, not theirs. Blood doesn't make you anything, Lyra. Your choices do. Always, she wanted to believe him, but deep down she felt the pull of destiny in her veins. The Aurelians had not been mistaken when they said she was unique. Somewhere inside her, something ancient stirred. She had seen glimpses in the simulation, small flashes of intuition, calculations that no ordinary human could process. Her mind worked faster under pressure, and her instincts in battle had saved their ship countless times. Perhaps Elias was right. Perhaps humanity had nurtured her, made her strong in ways that blood alone could never achieve. The ship's sensors suddenly beeped, interrupting her thoughts. A new fleet had emerged from hyperspace. Lyra's stomach tightened. The Aurelians had not waited long. They were relentless, precise, and now fully aware that the human ship could not escape easily. Elias barked orders to the crew, his voice steady, commanding. Lyra watched him, realizing how much he had taught her in a short time. Not just survival, but leadership, strategy, and courage. The human crew followed his instructions without hesitation, moving as one unit despite being small in number. They were human, flawed, unpredictable, yet brilliant in ways the Aurelians could never understand. Lyra, Elias said, leaning toward her, you're going to help. I need you at the systems panel. We're going to do something they won't expect. Lyra nodded, a mixture of fear and determination flooding her chest. She moved to the panel, fingers flying over the controls. She didn't fully understand the ship's systems yet, but instinct guided her. Every warning light, every system readout, told her what to do before she consciously processed it. Elias watched her, pride and concern flickering across his face. The Aurelians approached, weapons primed, their ships forming a perfect blockade. They expected humans to panic, to make mistakes. They did not anticipate creativity, improvisation, or sheer audacity. Lyra realized that their advantage lay not just in technology, but in expectation. They assumed humanity would obey the rules of engagement, but humans did not play by the same rules. Elias tapped a sequence on the console. Lyra, override the targeting system. Make them think we're moving in one direction while we go another. Her hands moved faster than she thought possible, her mind synchronizing with the ship's neural interface. For the first time, she felt a strange connection, not just with the ship, but with the logic and energy coursing through it. This was what the Aurelians had wanted, a human mind capable of interacting with advanced systems in ways they could control. But she was choosing to use it for herself, to protect her people, and to defy them. The ship twisted and rolled, weaving through the blockade. Energy beams streaked past, tearing apart nearby asteroids. The Aurelians fired relentlessly, but their precision faltered against human unpredictability. Every movement Lyra made seemed impossible, yet it worked. She felt a surge of exhilaration, a heady combination of fear and power. As they emerged from the blockade, the Aurelians regrouped for a final assault. But Lyra was ready. Using her intuitive understanding of the systems, she manipulated the ship's energy output to create decoys and false signals. The enemy fleet hesitated, confused by the illusions. This hesitation was enough. Elias seized the opportunity, piloting the ship through a narrow gravity well that the Aurelians could not follow. They emerged into an uncharted sector, the stars now calm and silent around them. Lyra slumped into her seat, exhaustion overwhelming her, but also a sense of pride. She had survived another encounter. She had not been a pawn, she had been a fighter. Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment, then smiled faintly. You're getting stronger, Lyra, faster than I expected. She shook her head, trying to process it. It's not just me. Humans, we find ways to survive, to fight back, even when it seems impossible. Elias nodded. Exactly, and that's why they fear you. Not because of blood, not because of technology, but because you are human, and humans are unpredictable. Lyra stared at the stars, thinking about what that meant. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for humanity, for the right to be free, for the right to make her own choices. The Aurelians had underestimated humans for centuries, believing that only bloodlines and strict control could command loyalty and power. But humans had something they could never predict: courage, ingenuity, and the will to survive against all odds. Days passed as they navigated the sector, avoiding known Aurelian patrols and seeking resources. The ship was damaged, requiring constant attention, but the crew worked tirelessly. Lyra spent the time learning from Elias and the engineers, absorbing knowledge at a pace that surprised even herself. She realized that being human did not mean weakness. It meant resilience, adaptability, and the ability to rise to challenges no one else could face. Then came the message, a transmission from deep space, encrypted and urgent. Elias decoded it quickly, his expression darkening as he read. The Aurelians had found a way to track them across light years. They were not just hunting Lyra, they were mobilizing an entire strike force, one designed to capture her alive. Lyra felt a cold shiver run through her. The reality of her situation sank in fully. She was a key, a target, and the galaxy itself seemed to conspire against her. But unlike before, she did not feel helpless. She had survived ambushes, outmaneuvered fleets, and discovered abilities she did not know she had. She understood something crucial. Power did not come from bloodline alone. It came from knowledge, courage, and the willingness to act. Elias looked at her. "They'll come for us soon, but we're not going to wait. We're going to strike first." Lyra's eyes widened. "Strike." "Against them?" "Yes," Elias said firmly. "Not just run. Humans don't survive by hiding forever. We survive by turning the tables, by using what we have, by being smarter than the enemy." The next days were a blur of preparation. Lyra worked with the crew to retrofit the ship's weapons, using both human ingenuity and her own growing understanding of the Aurelians' technology. They developed new strategies, simulations, and contingency plans. Every day, Lyra felt herself becoming more than a girl running from her past. She was becoming a symbol of defiance, a human mind capable of turning the galaxy's greatest weapon against itself. Then, finally, the Aurelians arrived. Their fleet was massive, covering light years with their presence, weapons bristling and ready. But the humans were prepared. Lyra's calculations, combined with Elia's leadership, created a trap that the Aurelians could not anticipate. Decoy ships, false signals, energy disruptions. Every move was designed to exploit the Aurelians' reliance on bloodline commands and rigid logic. The battle was fierce. Energy beams tore through space, ships spun out of control, and explosions lit the void like fireworks. Yet through it all, the humans remained unpredictable. Lyra coordinated systems, redirected power, and used the Aurelians' expectations against them. For every calculated strike, she added an element the enemy could not see coming: human creativity, bravery, and unorthodox tactics. In the heart of the battle, Lyra realized something remarkable. She was not just surviving, she was leading. She was shaping the fight, not as a pawn or a key, but as a human being fully capable of defiance. And for the first time, she felt the truth of Elia's words. Humans never follow the rules set by others. Humans make their own rules, and when the universe tries to force them down, they fight back. By the end of the encounter, the Aurelians had suffered significant losses, their fleet forced into retreat. The human ship, battered but intact, floated among the remnants of the battlefield. Lyra leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated, knowing that she had faced the impossible and prevailed. Elias approached her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're ready, Lyra. Whatever comes next, you'll face it the way humans always do, head-on, with courage and intelligence." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of determination stronger than ever before. The Aurelians would return. They would test her, try to control her, and claim her as their own. But she was ready. She understood her value, her power, and the limitless potential of the human spirit. And she would never surrender, because humans were unpredictable. Humans were defiant. And humans, no matter how small or outnumbered, always found a way. The human ship drifted through a dark sector of space, its engines low, sensors stretched to their limits. Lyra sat at the control panel, staring at the readings, the remnants of the Aurelian fleet still visible as small, distant blips in the starfield. The encounter had been hard, brutal, and exhausting, but it had revealed something more than survival. It had revealed her strength. Every calculation, every split-second decision, every command she gave had made a difference. And now, Lyra could feel the weight of what was coming. The Aurelians would not rest. They would send their best, their most cunning, to reclaim her, to use her as they always intended. Elias stood behind her, watching quietly. He had taught her everything she needed to know about human ingenuity, improvisation, and courage. But even he knew that the coming fight would test her in ways she had never imagined. "Lyra," he said softly, "they'll be here soon. And when they arrive, it won't just be a fight for survival. It'll be a fight for who controls the future. You need to be ready for everything." Lyra nodded, though her stomach twisted with anxiety. She had survived ambushes, outmaneuvered fleets, and manipulated systems far beyond what she understood. But this was different. This was not just about running or hiding. This was about facing the empire that had defined her as a key, a tool, and a weapon. It was about showing the galaxy that humans could never be controlled. As if on cue, the ship's sensors erupted with activity. A massive Aurelian strike force emerged from hyperspace, far larger than anything the humans had encountered before. Dozens of sleek, metallic warships moved with precision, bristling with weapons designed to obliterate entire fleets. Lyra felt a cold shiver run through her. The Aurelians had not underestimated them. They had prepared for total domination. Elias moved quickly, issuing orders. "Lyra, I need you at the main console. Override the tracking systems, create decoys, and redirect their sensors. We're going to make them chase ghosts." Her fingers flew over the controls, and she felt that strange, electric connection with the ship again. The one that allowed her to anticipate movements, calculate outcomes, and react faster than anyone expected. The Aurelians believed that her genetic code could control their systems. They believed she was their tool. But Lyra had chosen her own path. She would not be their key. She would be humanity's weapon, not theirs. The battle began with a deafening roar. Energy beams tore through the void, exploding against asteroids and debris. The human ship twisted and turned with impossible precision, weaving through the attack patterns the Aurelians expected them to follow. Lyra's improvisation created false trails, decoy signatures, and unpredictable maneuvers that left the alien fleet confused and vulnerable. Elias called out instructions, his voice calm but commanding. "Now, Lyra. Push the energy to the forward shields, overload the decoy projection. Make them think we're trapped." Lyra obeyed instantly, feeling a surge of exhilaration and fear. The ship shimmered as energy pulses distorted its profile, creating the illusion of multiple vessels. The Aurelians fired relentlessly, but their accuracy faltered. They could not predict humans, and Lyra knew it. Humanity's greatest strength was their unpredictability, their ability to think outside the rules of logic and expectation. For hours, the battle raged. The human crew fought with skill, bravery, and ingenuity, but it was Lyra's unique abilities that turned the tide. She could interface with the ship's systems in ways no other human could, rerouting power, projecting false signals, and coordinating attacks with a mind that moved faster than any algorithm the Aurelians had developed. She felt the power inside her, the strange heritage that had made her valuable, but she used it on her terms for human survival. Then came the moment of truth. A massive Aurelian battleship broke through their defenses, heading straight for the human vessel. Its weapons glowed with destructive energy, and Lyra realized that if it fired, there would be nothing left. But she also realized something important. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight to prove that humans were not predictable, controllable, or weak. "Elias, I think I can do it," she said, her voice steady despite the fear inside. "I can access their control network, shut down their targeting, and create a system-wide confusion. It's risky, but it could save us." Elias looked at her, eyes wide but trusting. "Do it, Lyra. But remember, control is yours. Only yours, no one else." Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath. She closed her eyes briefly and let her mind connect with the interface, feeling the energy pulses, the flow of commands, the intricate patterns of the enemy fleet. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, an ocean of logic, structure, and cold calculation. But she was human. She was unpredictable. She was defiance incarnate, and she would not be bent. Her mind reached into the network, overriding protocols, injecting chaos into the Aurelian systems. Lights flickered across the enemy ships, energy beams misfired, and communications faltered. The fleet staggered as confusion spread like wildfire. Lyra felt the pulse of power within her, a strange combination of alien coding and human instinct, and she knew she was changing the battle not through force alone, but through ingenuity. The humans seized the opportunity. Ships broke formation, launched counterattacks, and exploited the chaos Lyra had created. For every calculation the Aurelians made, the humans countered with creativity, courage, and strategy. The battle was no longer just about weapons, it was about human spirit. Amid the chaos, Lyra saw her chance. She activated a series of maneuvers designed to draw the largest Aurelian ships into an asteroid field, where their precision and numbers became a disadvantage. The enemy fleet, overconfident and reliant on their systems, fell right into the trap. Explosions ripped through the field, and one by one the Aurelian ships were destroyed or forced to retreat. Elias came to her side, his face a mixture of pride and awe. "Lyra, you did it. You turned the impossible into possible. You didn't just survive, you led." Lyra exhaled, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. For the first time, she truly understood the power of humanity. They were not the strongest, not the largest, not the most technologically advanced. But they were smart, adaptable, and defiant. They never surrendered. They never followed rules set by others. They made their own rules, and when the galaxy tried to control them, they fought back. But even in victory, Lyra knew the war was far from over. The Aurelians would return. They would learn from their mistakes and try again. And the galaxy still had mysteries she had not uncovered, truths about her heritage, her abilities, and her role in the universe. She had survived because she was human, but survival alone would not be enough. To protect her people, she would have to embrace her full potential. That night, as the ship sailed through quiet space, Lyra reflected on what had happened. She had been a target, a key, a child claimed by empires. But she had chosen her own path. She had not surrendered, not once. And she realized something even more profound. Blood did not define her. Choice did. Courage did. Humanity did. Elias joined her at the viewport, looking at the stars stretching into infinity. "You've changed the rules, Lyra," he said quietly. "The Aurelians won't expect what comes next, and neither will anyone else." Lyra nodded. "I know, and I'm ready. Whatever they send, whatever they try, humans will not bow. We never do." A distant light appeared on the sensors, another fleet approaching. Lyra felt a familiar thrill in her chest. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She would not run. She would not hide. She would face the galaxy, her heritage, and her enemies on her terms. As the stars streaked past, she made a promise to herself and to humanity. She would use her abilities not as a weapon for others, but as a shield for those who could not defend themselves. She would prove that humans were more than pawns, more than tools, and more than prey. The Aurelians would return, but when they did, they would discover something they could never predict. Humans were unbreakable, humans were defiant, and humans always found a way. Lyra turned to Elias, determination blazing in her eyes. "It's time," she said. "We end this not for them, but for us." Elias smiled, a rare and genuine smile. "Then let's show them what humanity really means." And as the human ship accelerated toward the approaching fleet, Lyra felt the weight of her heritage and the strength of her people coursing through her. The galaxy would never forget the name of the girl who chose defiance over destiny, courage over fear, and humanity over all else. Because humans never follow rules. Humans never surrender. Humans always find a way. The approaching fleet filled the viewport like a swarm of dark stars. Lyra's hands rested lightly on the controls, her mind sharp and steady. She could feel the energy coursing through the human ship, a pulse of anticipation and determination that matched her own heartbeat. This was it. The Aurelians had returned, larger, stronger, and more determined than ever. But Lyra was no longer the same girl who had screamed at Elias months ago. She had faced ambushes, survived impossible battles, and learned that her greatest power was not her bloodline, it was her humanity. Elias stood behind her, silent, observing. He knew this would be the defining moment. The Aurelians did not fight humans because of numbers or technology. They underestimated them. They assumed obedience could be programmed, strategy predicted, and victory guaranteed. But Lyra had proven time and again that humans defied expectation. That unpredictability, that spark of ingenuity and courage, was humanity's greatest weapon. "Lyra," Elias said quietly, "this is the moment we've been preparing for. You know what to do." She nodded, her eyes fixed on the dark ships in the distance. "Yes, we don't just fight to survive. We fight to show them humans are not to be controlled. We fight to choose our own destiny." The Aurelians opened fire, energy beams cutting through space with deadly precision. The human ship twisted and rolled, dodging the attacks with skill and speed that seemed impossible for its size. Lyra's fingers flew across the controls. activating decoys, redirecting power, and coordinating maneuvers with an instinctive grace that amazed even Elias. She felt a strange resonance with the ship, as if it were an extension of herself. She realized that the Aurelians' greatest mistake had been believing she could be used, that she could be commanded. They had underestimated the strength of choice. The battle raged for hours, stars exploding around them as human ingenuity met alien technology head-on. Lyra issued commands, rerouted energy to shields at the perfect moment, and created interference patterns that scrambled the enemy's targeting systems. The Aurelians faltered, frustrated, and confused by the unpredictability of their opponent. Every move they calculated was countered by human creativity, every attack met with defiance. Amid the chaos, Lyra accessed the Aurelians' control network, the one they had believed would allow them to command her. For a moment, the alien codes glowed across her interface, intricate and precise, designed to bend wills and enforce obedience. But she was not a pawn. She was not a tool. With calm determination, she reversed their control systems, turning their own weapons and communications into a cascade of confusion. Ships collided with one another, beams misfired, and the fleet staggered under the strain of its own command protocols being manipulated by a human mind. Elias shouted orders as he piloted the ship through the chaos. "Lyra, keep them off balance. Lead them into the asteroid field." With perfect precision, Lyra guided the ship toward a dense cluster of asteroids, using the terrain as an ally. The Aurelians, relying on calculated movements, were trapped. Their formation broke, and one by one, ships collided with asteroids or were destroyed by misfired weapons. Lyra's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the exhilaration of watching a galaxy's greatest power falter under the ingenuity of one human girl and her crew. The human forces pressed the advantage, launching coordinated attacks that capitalized on the chaos Lyra had created. It was not just technology that won the day. It was adaptability, courage, and the unyielding will to survive. For every attack the Aurelians had planned, the humans had a counter, unpredictable and devastating. Lyra realized with awe that this was what humanity had always done. Against nature, against enemies, against impossible odds. Humans never surrendered. Humans never followed rules set by others. Humans always found a way. Amid the battle, Lyra sensed something deep within her, a connection to her heritage she had never fully understood. The Aurelians had believed that her bloodline gave them authority over her. But it was not authority. They had not anticipated that she could take that power and use it for herself. With a surge of energy, she interfaced with the Aurelian flagship, shutting down its systems and broadcasting a message across their fleet. Humans will not obey. Humans will not yield. Humans fight. The effect was immediate. Confusion spread through the Aurelian ranks, their cohesion broken by a mind they could not predict or control. Human ships struck with precision and determination, forcing the aliens into retreat. Lyra felt a rush of triumph, but also a sobering awareness. This victory was hard-won, and the war was far from over. Yet it was proof that humans could challenge even the greatest empires, not through numbers or technology alone, but through courage, choice, and ingenuity. After the battle, the human ship floated among the wreckage, battered but intact. Lyra slumped into her seat, exhausted, her body trembling from the intensity of the fight. Elias came to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder, his expression a mixture of pride and relief. "You've done something incredible, Lyra. Not just survived, but changed the rules of the game. The galaxy won't forget this." Lyra nodded, trying to catch her breath. She thought of the Aurelians, their obsession with bloodlines and control, and she realized that what they feared most was not strength, it was defiance. Humanity had something they could never predict: the will to choose, the courage to act, and the intelligence to adapt. "Elias," she said softly, "I understand now. Blood doesn't define us. Power doesn't define us. Humans define themselves." He smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "Exactly. And you, Lyra, have shown them what it means to be human. Not because of your heritage, but because of your choices." The ship's sensors picked up distant signals from other human colonies. Messages of hope, survival, and resistance began to flood in. Lyra realized that her actions had done more than save a ship or a crew. They had inspired a galaxy. Species that had long been oppressed by the Aurelians began to see that control was not inevitable. Freedom was possible. Choice was possible. Humanity had shown the way. In the quiet aftermath, Lyra walked through the ship, observing the crew. Each person bore scars, exhaustion, and relief. They had followed her, trusted her, and fought beside her. She felt a deep sense of connection, not just to Elias, not just to the crew, but to humanity itself. This was what made them strong, bonds forged by choice, courage, and mutual respect, not blood or obligation. Finally, she returned to the cockpit, looking out at the stars stretched across the void. Somewhere in the distance, the Aurelian fleets would regroup, would plan revenge, and would attempt to claim what they believed was theirs. But they would never truly understand humans. Humans were unpredictable, defiant, and unstoppable when driven by choice and courage. Elias joined her at the viewport. "What now?" he asked. Lyra's gaze remained on the horizon. "Now, we ensure they know the galaxy belongs to no one. We protect the weak, defend the innocent, and remind the universe that humans do not bow." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "And what about you?" Lyra smiled faintly, a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and resolve. "I'll be ready. Whatever comes next, I face it as I always have, human, defiant, and free." The stars stretched before them, endless and infinite. And Lyra understood that her journey was far from over. She had embraced her heritage, not as a tool, but as a strength to be used on her own terms. She had proven that humans could face the impossible and prevail. And in that proof lay a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity does not inherit loyalty. Humans earn it. Humanity does not obey by blood. Humans choose it. The ship accelerated toward the uncharted regions of space, carrying a girl who had been hunted, claimed, and underestimated. But Lyra was no longer just a girl. She was a symbol. A human who had defied destiny, rewritten the rules of engagement, and shown the galaxy what it truly meant to survive and to thrive. The Aurelians would return, of course. Empires never surrender. But Lyra, Elias, and the humans had changed the playing field. They had proven that intelligence, courage, and choice could topple the strongest of powers. And the galaxy would never forget that humans, small in number but vast in spirit, could always find a way. Lyra turned to Elias, her voice calm but resolute. "They'll come back. And when they do, we'll be ready." Elias smiled. "Always." And as the ship sailed into the stars, Lyra felt a sense of peace she had never known, not because the battle was over, but because she had chosen her path. She had survived, she had fought, and she had defined herself. Humanity had not only endured, they had triumphed, because humans never follow rules that are forced upon them. Humans never bow to fear or bloodlines. Humans always find a way, and the galaxy would remember that forever.